key is you still have to think about the opportunity costs or lost opportunity costs of not doing it at all.
Most people just put them on the OTAs and cross their fingers and hope for the best. What have you learned when it comes to diversifying your booking sources?
I know that it is sustainable and scalable to a point around 40 or 50 doors. Beyond that, it just becomes much more difficult to maintain quality.
I want to talk about the arbitrage model. I hear a lot of people saying that that model is dead.
We hit our head against the wall like everyone does initially trying to do acquisitions. We would have failed miserably with our process. You have to be willing to do the things that other people won't do in your industry or business.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hospitality Edge podcast, where we bring together what we think are two sides of the same coin: real estate and hospitality. We bring here entrepreneurs, operators, leaders, investors in the space so they can tell us about their stories, the lessons they have learned along the way, as well as the mistakes they have learned along the way, made along the way, and that way you don't have to make those same mistakes. Today, I'm excited to have Mike Brown, the founder of PBD Living, with us on the show. Thank you, Mike, for being here today. How are you doing?
Doing great. Doing great. Glad to be on the show, and thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely, Mike. So, why don't we get started with you just telling us a little bit about your background? So, how do you get into this industry of hospitality and vacation rentals in the first place?
Yeah. So my background is actually in engineering. So I graduated with my bachelor's in engineering, and right out of school started working traditional engineering role with a MEP firm, which is a mechanical, electrical, plumbing company, and they did consulting. And I was on their energy efficiency team for commercial buildings. And so what that
Mhm.
means is we were finding ways as a consultant to maximize energy efficiency for commercial buildings. So we worked with a lot of developers. It was mainly residential projects. And I think that's where a lot of my just background, general knowledge, not only in construction, but operations and management comes from my experience on the residential side of things. Um, and maximizing energy efficiency, whether that be, building envelope insulation measures, lighting, HVAC, so on and so forth, to reduce utility cost, right, for the owner on those projects. And being a consultant for that, which I'm still doing that today in this capacity with a larger company or larger firm, and really being able to be an advocate for the owner and be that collaborator, integrator on a project team. Because as you know, there's very many different disciplines that go into building a building, right, and in designing a building. So bringing
Mhm.
all those key players to the table, understanding what those goals and aspirations are, and actually making that happen. Um, Obviously from our perspective, we're trying to do it in a sustainable way, an energy efficient way, as much as possible. So being able to focus on those aspects, and even other things too, like water efficiency, saving water from an environmental standpoint, and indoor air quality for the human impact, that the building has. So, all that education and knowledge, I don't use all that necessarily for, short-term rentals, but I think just the background and understanding the mindset and where they're coming from helps when, bringing certain things to the table and thinking about different innovative strategies that you could potentially implement on a project or even a home, if you have the capacity to be able to do that, to make different retrofits or alterations. So,
Mm. And how and where when in that process, like, walk me through the timeline of you becoming an entrepreneur and getting into vacation rentals.
yeah. So me becoming an entrepreneur, I would say probably started well before then. The
Okay.
entrepreneurial bug, if you will, kind of runs in my family, just because my dad, he was an entrepreneur. He had his own handyman business, his own automotive shop. And he also was in the real estate industry as well. At a, I don't want
Mhm.
to say at a smaller capacity, but he was a landlord, so he owned a couple of properties. He would do the repairs himself. Sometimes he had other folks, but so he was an entrepreneur. A lot of my other family members are entrepreneurs. in other industries. But I would say for me specifically, it probably started when I was maybe about 12 or 13, maybe 14 years old. And I actually started my own lawn care business when I was in high school.
Okay.
So essentially, what I did is I had had lots of experience cutting my own yard as a chore, right? For something I did for the home for the parents, right? So cutting the grass, trimming hedges, all that kind of stuff. And so I started to branch out to that and say, hey, well, maybe I can start making some money off of this. Because our neighbor had asked me to do his yard because he saw how well, we
Hmm.
maintained ours, so on and so forth. And so I started cutting his yard on a regular basis and he would pay me. And then I was like, well, I want to, make some more revenue. I want to be able to buy the things I want to buy. Being in high school or being a kid, you just want to buy, the nicest shoes. You can buy the nicest clothes, so on and so forth. You want to be able to go to the movies, all that kind of stuff. And I knew that that
Hmm.
required money. I don't come from wealth. I wouldn't say, we're poor per se. We were like a normal family. Not extravagant living. We didn't go on vacations every year or anything like that. So pretty modest. And from that, I just grew and I just started doing more and more neighbors in the neighborhood's yards. And then I started to expand outside of our neighborhood. I started to create flyers and things of that nature to get more business and referrals and all those kinds of things. So I think at the height, I probably had about 25, yeah, about 25 yards on my route. Now, this is before I had a vehicle. So you can probably imagine how is he getting this lawnmower and this weed eater and all these other tools from place to place? So what I would do is I'd have the lawnmower attached to my bike, and I would bike to
No
the
way.
neighborhoods to be able to cut the lawns and everything, with my little gas can and everything. So um, I think out of that experience, it taught me a couple of things. One is, you know, you can only grow so large on your own, because at that point, I mean, I was kind of at capacity, and unless I had a team or started to delegate
Hmm.
this to other people, there was going to be a cap at how much money I could make, regardless of the number of services I can add. You can also only charge so much as well for something like that. And it was at the time, I mean, all residential. I didn't do any commercial, any commercial lines, and it also taught me work ethic too, because let me tell you, doing a service based business like that in the summer heat or Texas heat in general, it's really humbling work to tell you the least.
Hmm.
So and this was before the time of, at least what I can recall, to a certain point, before the time of where I could just pop in, my headset and listen to music while I'm doing this and everything. So this was like, hey, it's just me and the and nature kind of thing, right? Just out cutting grass and so so.
Hmm.
So anyway, it's a really great experience because it taught me, the business aspect, because I had business cards. I had, like I said, the flyers that I would hand out to people that were interested. Even if they were smaller projects, like one-time projects for lawn care. Building rapport. Actually, being able to know how to approach people as a business owner, and selling your product or selling your service. Why should I hire you, kind of thing. All those aspects. And then just the general knowledge of, a little bit about money management, right? In terms of, bringing money in, what it's going to be used for. Um, I'm not saying it was sophisticated by any means. I was still a kid, right? So a lot of it all went to consumer stuff, right? But, um, you
It
know,
was something. It was a foundation.
yeah. But it's a great learning experience. And if I can, I'd love to share the other business that I started after that, which
For
is
sure.
actually, if that's okay with you, yeah. But,
Of course.
and I'll be short with this story, but it was actually a vending business. So I actually started candy vending machine business before I graduated high school. And so I had a route in my hometown. And then I also had a route in the city, which is College Station, where I went to Texas A&M. I had a route there. So what I would do is I would go home for, the weekend, whether it's, once a month or every other month. that's when I would go change out the candy machines and collect the money, restock them and everything, and vice versa when I went back to university during the school year. I think I had about 30, 30, um,
Wait.
about 30
30
locations
machines?
between the two cities. And it varied between restaurants, barbershops. Um, I think we had a couple in some motels. We had actually some grocery stores that had some as well. It's,
How old were you?
I mean, I was what, 18, 19, maybe? I just graduated high
Oh,
school.
wait, you were 18 and you had 18, yeah, sorry, 30? You said 30 machines? Like 30
Yeah,
30
over like the course of a year or two, it got up to like 30 machines across, or 30 locations across.
wow.
So it spawned out of just literally, I don't want to say on a whim, but one of my mentors was sharing some business stuff with me, and he was sharing someone that he knew that was making, upwards of six figures doing vending machines. It's like, oh, that'd be a great kind of side thing to do, to make some extra revenue. It's somewhat passive, right? I don't have to be there to make the
Hmm.
sale. And so I just started and just started to grow and grow from there. Initially, I would actually get my own locations by going, either door to door or calling. So again, more experience on the business side, knowing how to do cold calls, how to do warm calls, how to follow up. Um,
Hmm.
the actual part, because when I actually did that business, I actually did create an LLC. So I created an LLC with a DBA. I had business cards. Um, we had like little brochures that we can hand out to businesses that where we wanted to do potential, candy machines with, or partnerships with.
Hmm.
And this kind of went from there. And then once I got to the point where I got really busy in my studies at school, because it was an engineering degree, right? I actually had to hire a company to do the cold calling for me. They would basically find the locations, we pay them a commission, and then all I have to do is drop off the machine. So it was a great experience.
And just out
There's a
of
lot of things I
curiosity
learned.
there, real quick, just out of curiosity, how long did it take for the machine to be paid back and you to like be at a point where you could buy the next one? Like, because you maybe start with one, but then to grow to 30, I mean, you like, what was the math behind it at a high
Yeah.
level?
So for me, it varied because you'd have some machines that are like in a high volume location, right? Could pay for itself in, I mean, literally 2 months, kind of thing, right?
Hmm.
Or even less in some cases. Like, so it being a college town, because I know we had some in the bars, like this, the bars.
Okay.
So people would buy candy at the bars, and things of that nature. So there would be times where I have to refill those twice a month, as opposed to once a month or once every other month. And then that's when I started to think about inventory and storage and all that. As many trips to Costco or Sam's Club actually back in the day, and inventory and trying to keep up and not buying too much so the candy doesn't go stale. And then there's with the candy machines you can add multiple heads on. They call them heads, the canisters. So if it was a high volume location and I wanted to scale back on the number of times I had to refill, then you just add on another head. So it gives you more volume, to be able to do that. So um, and then there was actually a lot of like self-education that I did too with that process. I mean, there's tons of, books you can read about vending and operations and all this kind of stuff, uh, to learn about efficiency, maximizing all of that. I mean, even like down to like the routes or the trip, right? So I had to plan my trip. So I'm going to go to this location, that location, this location for the whole day, or maybe I had to break it up over 2 days, to get to all the locations. So all that kind
Wow.
of stuff. Now thinking back on it is actually a really cool endeavor, and it's
Yeah, I
it's
mean, 30 machines is not nothing, man. And while you were studying, so when do you like, what happened with that? Did you sell that business eventually, or
yeah.
you
So
still have the machines? Like, what's the deal there?
no. I actually sold it once I graduated, because
Okay.
once I left College Station, I mean, I wasn't going back, to just do that. And same thing with my hometown. I wasn't going back because I was in a brand new city at that time, which was nowhere near those two cities. So I sold the
Okay.
route, made a pretty decent profit. It is interesting that the guy that I actually sold it to, he was already an operator. And so, like with a lot of things, if you're able to build up a route or location, just similar to how people do pool routes, if you've heard about that, there's a lot of money or value into that because think about all the effort that went into securing the locations. And now you have something that's income generating every single month. So that's
For sure.
yeah. The hardest part for me at the time, because and I can't even remember how I did it, but is figuring out how much I was going to sell the business for. There were no books, anything that I learned or read, so I probably undersold. But I still made a decent profit. A college grad, selling a business after graduation kind of thing. Um, it's a pretty cool experience.
Pretty sweet, man. And at that point, like, is your like has your mind started thinking about real estate as an asset class, as something you want to eventually get into? Like, when does the whole real estate thing become part of the mix for you, and like, how does that come about?
Yeah, yeah. So I had the fortunate opportunity to be involved in a lot of professional organizations even before graduating. Which, um, one of them in particular was National Society of Black Engineers, or NSBE. Um, aside from the industry related principles and skills, whether it's for interviewing, how to get a job, all that kind of stuff. Um, and just like the corporate presence, and those kinds of skills. Um, they really also talked about opportunities for building generational wealth, and being your own boss and things of that nature, as a growth strategy and a long term mindset to have. And so
Hmm.
with that, real estate was one of those avenues or one of those strategies. I
Hmm.
didn't really dive deep into it right after graduation, which now I look back on and wish, that would have been one of the things that I changed. I basically did nothing real estate related for the first probably 4 or 5 years after graduation.
Okay.
It wasn't until I think 2017, 2018 maybe, that I started to get back into the mindset of, okay, well, I need to start preparing to, buying a home or a multifamily that will cash flow, because ultimately, I had aspirations to be able to, own a corporate um, uh, apartment complex, with hundreds of units kind of thing.
Hmm.
And so with that mindset, that's where I stumbled upon, I had mentioned the real estate podcast, and they talked about short term rentals. And at the time, it was a concept that I was familiar with, but really hadn't taken a deep dive into understanding the process, how to get started, and things of that nature. And even after I had gone
Hmm.
to some local meetups, there's local Dallas Short Term Rental Association and other kind of informal networking events that people would host to talk about that, and other real estate
Hmm.
meetups. It really gave me an opportunity to just kind of, I wish I would have started sooner, but just passively see how people grew their businesses, and some of the strategies that they use, some of the pitfalls, and things of that nature, and even some of the quick hacks. I think a lot of the business mindset, or not even the business mindset, but the business structure part of short-term rentals and how you should structure your business, how to do financing, bookkeeping, all of that. I think a lot of people, there's not a lot of information about that out there for our industry. And I think
Hmm.
that's where a lot of people could use some help, in general. But um, after going to a couple of those meetups, um, I still hadn't pulled the trigger. And it wasn't until I met my wife and we were going to be getting married, we got engaged, that we were going to be moving in together. So our leases did not end at the same time. And so we had some overlap, and that overlap was about
Hmm.
7 months. So we didn't want to have to pay for two leases, right? And we couldn't break the lease for the other property that we were in. And so we said, hey, well, how about we put it on Airbnb, short term rent? This was right before the pandemic. And so we, not intentionally, had three midterm rentals back to back. So I think one stayed for a month, the other one for like 2 or 3 months, and then the last person, we had them all up until a couple of days before the lease was out, so we could move out the furniture and do the move out clean, right? And
Hmm.
so in that process, we did learn, how to set up the listing. But again, comparative to today, we would have failed miserably with we how we at least with our process, right? Because we didn't have a process or standard per se. We only had
Hmm.
one unit as well.
Hmm.
Today we had
Yeah.
we between arbitrage, lease, own, and manage about 26 stores. And so
Hmm.
we at the time with that one property, there wasn't a lot of need to do that. And so
But
that's
at that point, it was an arbitrage model, right? You were
basically,
subleasing
yeah,
the
yeah,
units, and then you realize, okay, there's something here. Um, is the next move to buy something? Do you just go and try to scale that arbitrage model that you had just tested out, like from not like from 1 to 26? Like, walk me through
sure.
the timeline. What were some of those first steps, and when did you realize that this was something that you could do, right? That this was a business, and started focusing on scaling it.
Yeah. So after that lease was up, we said, "Well, man, what are we going to do with this furniture? Um, do we want to start another one somewhere else and things of that nature?" And at that time, I had no idea about acquisitions at all. However, I did do some handyman work on the side, and I worked with some contractors from time to time. And one of those contractors was actually the property manager or maintenance manager for an apartment complex. And so he talked to me in, and he said, and I just brought it up randomly in the conversation. And I said, "Hey, we're trying to figure out what to do with this furniture. We had Airbnb, so on and so forth." He's like, "Well, hey, we have a vacant unit at one of the complexes that I manage and work in, and we do repairs and all that kind of stuff for it." He said, "You can do it there. I can talk to the office manager and see if they'll let you do it." And I was like, "Yeah, that'd be great." And so his introduction to the office manager really gave us the foot in the door for that very first like true like this is in the LLC and all that kind of stuff. And then that's when the structure came about and the idea of scaling and building a larger portfolio.
But
At the time,
that was arbitrage too. That was you put a lease on that apartment, and then you started. Okay, so
mhm,
so far we're still only with arbitrage.
yep. And so from
Okay.
there, and I just want to build the context. Um, And again, I know the whole short-term rental industry, not only just the competitiveness, but also the level of design and standard of care and all these other things, all the tech behind it. We didn't have any of that. So we had a lockbox on the very on the very first one for like the first year. It was all a lockbox, and so
Mm.
so very rudimentary, low tech. Unfortunately, um, the property was also a Class B property. So if you know anything about the different classes of apartment complexes, you have your Class A, which is your brand new apartment complex. They have all the nice shiny amenities, the pools, so on and so forth. And then you kind of scale down from there, all the way down to maybe even a Class C property. So to be honest, it was probably borderline Class B, Class C. Didn't have a fitness center, didn't have a pool. It didn't have washer and dryer hookups either. There was a shared laundry for the entire complex. It was a smaller complex with maybe 40 units. Um, and so there were some challenges, right, with that type of because you have to know what type of avatar you want to bring to that location, right? So that's when we started learning about the different type of avatars and pricing. And this is before the smart pricing even came about, right? How to price the property, and also learning about all of the we did have a smart lock. We used August lock. That was the only tech that we had for that second unit. And then from there about design. We didn't have a lot of influence on design because we basically used the furniture from my old apartment and moved that in to that unit. And we
Hmm.
actually had that
Hmm.
arbitrage for about 2 years. So I don't want to go through the whole story because there's lots of stories with that one. But from there, the next step was okay, well, how are we going to get into our next um, few arbitrage units and then ultimately into to owning and buying. Um, and so the
Hmm.
next thing that we did, we hit our head against the wall, like everyone does initially trying to do acquisitions, whether it's calling, doing tours with either homeowners to do homes or apartment complexes to do lease arbitrage in an apartment complex or an apartment.
Hmm.
And in those two strategies, the mindset can be a little bit different in how you approach and all these things. I don't want to go into the details, but really, you have to be able to provide value to the person on the other side of the table. Ultimately, I think a
Hmm.
lot of people trip up in having the mindset and positioning themselves to ask, "Hey, can I do Airbnb or can I arbitrage or can I lease the property?" So on and so forth. Whether you call it a corporate rental, or whatnot is, something else. But just the whole mindset of I'm here to add value to you. And so the way we
Hmm.
did that, we actually picked up. So we from that first one, we picked up another three. And the only way we were able to do this is we actually partnered with another operator who had already been doing arbitrage, and he was wanting to grow his portfolio as well. And so we actually partnered together and we came together as a partnership to this apartment complex and we picked up 10 units. I picked up three and he picked up six. And so
But
we,
how did you position? Like, what did you learn about the way in which you had to position yourself to be seen as if like you're the one adding value to the landlord rather than they are
oh,
the ones doing you a favor?
absolutely. So the positioning ourselves with the partnership for one was key. Um, More so with apartment complexes at all scales uh, compared to an individual landlord that may, own one or two homes. Very, very different conversation because there's a level of risk that they have to understand and mitigate. Are you a
Hmm.
legitimate company? What's your company credit scores? All those kinds of things. How long have you been operating? And being able, one, to position yourself as a legitimate company and having all that structure in place, but two, also the leverage of picking up that many units in one location. That is the key, or one of the keys.
Hmm.
Many times people, I get it, you're first starting out, you may only be able to have the money to afford to only pick up one unit, maybe two, maybe three. And in the grand scheme of things, for in most cases, unless it's a dire situation with low occupancy for the apartment complex, will that give you enough leverage for them to take you seriously? That is the key
Hmm.
because most of the times when you're reaching out to that person in that leasing office or wherever it is, they're essentially the gatekeeper, right? So they're really not the person that's making the decision. It's going to be the regional director or even someone else higher up in that company. So in order for them
Hmm.
to even put you in a position to ask them or to waste their time, essentially, the offer has to be tasty enough, right? So having the leverage of picking up that many units, they know that you're serious. They know that you have the financial backing if you're picking up that many units as
Hmm.
well, because it's easy to slip and fall out of having just one unit or two units, right? Um, and so
Okay, so that's
you talked
one.
about
So
the
number one,
benefits.
you were
Oh,
making it attractive by picking up multiple units at the same time, and then were you also paying a premium? Like, were you offering a premium versus what they could have gotten if they rented those as long term rentals, and that also became attractive to them, or not necessarily?
no, so that's one of the other potential big mistakes that people make, whether you're picking up one door or 10 doors, is negotiate. You'd never want to pay market rent for a unit. And so in those scenarios, by having that leverage, and in many cases across the board, some apartment complexes more than others, they want to be able to have high occupancy, right? Typically want to be above 90% in many cases. And
Hmm.
so you that could be a target audience, and you target those types of apartment complexes. So you're adding value by improving their occupancy because that improves their bottom line, that makes them look good, their boss look good, that makes their projections, all their numbers look good. But even more so on brand new apartment complexes where they're doing a refinance, the higher the occupancy that they can do the refinance for, the higher they're going to be able to get on the refinance. So you're bringing benefit to them by solving that problem, right? Of low occupancy. Um, the other key to that too is if you have a good track record, and in this case, I had a little bit of experience with the one unit I had, but the other operator that I was partnering with had some experience, way more experience than me. And so he brought to the table the operations experience, all of the things around, having systems in place to be able to screen our guests, all of that, because that is one of the main pain points that landlords and apartment complexes have alike is how are you managing who's coming into the apartment complex, right? Like, what does that process look like? Some are more strict than others on how they want to maybe micromanage that. But in our particular case, being able to present that our business structure, the leverage, the way we maintain our units as well. They have to be basically in rent for rent condition at all times. So we're not neglecting, the units. We're not, leaving things broken, so on and so forth. So all of those things that they would otherwise have to potentially worry about with a normal long term tenant. More so for a landlord than an apartment complex, but I'm sure you've heard the horror stories about when people leave. They spend thousands and thousands of dollars on repairs to get the unit back up to where it should be to rent it out again. You never have that with us ever because it has to be
Hmm.
in the rent condition at all times. Because if it's not, we aren't making any money, right? So
Hmm.
the level or standard of care that we have in doing that process, there's multiple cleans that happen all the time. So we're keeping the place clean, right? Because the cleaners are coming. So all
Yeah,
those
yeah.
kinds of things, those are value propositions. And
Okay.
typically what you want to do is you want to be able to negotiate ideally either first month's rent or a couple of weeks rent free when you're picking up multiple doors like that. That also gives you leverage so that you can start to cash flow much faster, right?
Hmm.
And in some cases, you may be able to get 2 months free rent, right? Or you can stack. I call it basically stack negotiating, where you could stack on, a couple of weeks or a month free of rent. Maybe you have a waived or a reduced security deposit, or in the many cases for apartment complexes, there's application fees and other fees that are associated with onboarding, a new unit for even if you're a normal tenant,
Hmm.
right? And that could be hundreds of dollars per door. So negotiating all of that so that your first cost can be as less as possible, right? Is really, really key. And I think people that fail to do that can find it challenging in the long run to maintain, higher profitabilities, being more competitive in their market. And another part of that layered stacking would be negotiating a multi-year lease. So that could be a 2-year lease, a 3-year lease, because now you're able to lock in that rate. Because as we know, typically rent prices are always increasing. So if you can lock in that rate, 2, 3 years, that gives you more predictable cash flow, right? So you're not expecting a big increase, because in some markets, like expanding markets like Dallas, where you've got huge populations transitioning, moving to the city, where there's tons of multifamily going up and rates are going up. We've seen not properties, but other properties rent renewal increases anywhere from $50 to three or $400 a month. So
Hmm.
imagine, let's starting out, you just say rent was $1,500 and you were only able to get a 1-year lease. And now on the renewal is $1,700. That can make a big difference. And so understanding that
Hmm. Hmm.
dynamic and trying to negotiate that on the front end it can be really, really key. And I would say in terms of, and this is another part where people potentially fail. This is after you get the deal and after you move in, after you've been operating, is nurturing the relationship not only with the apartment management team, but also the owner, if you're able to have that access on an ongoing basis. Because a lot of times people set it and forget it. They're like, hey, I signed the lease, I'm here, I'm good, and never speak to the office at all unless there's an issue. If plumbing goes out or AC goes out, but you should. It's literally a partnership still. I'm not saying you need to be in their
Yeah.
office every single day, but you need to send them emails, you need to send them, thank you cards, gifts on holidays, all those kinds of things, because you're nurturing a relationship. And now they could be your
Hmm.
best advocate because guess what? They probably manage other properties in the city and they can refer you because we've seen that happen before. They can refer you to other property managers to solve their issue potentially of low occupancy. And so at that point,
Hmm.
you can have your pick of the litter, right? So you have multiple options or potentially multiple options that now you can take those on yourself if you like. You can partner with other people if you feel comfortable enough, because again, it's your reputation, it's your business, and that's the way you have to think about it. Um, you could also broker that deal to someone else that is looking to get into the industry. So if they had the need,
Hmm.
say, hey, I know such and such that that they're willing to take on 3, 4 units, so on and so forth. If you're willing to put your business on the line because it's your reputation, you could do that as well, and you could do commission on that. So there's a lot of opportunity there. Um, One other thing I
Hmm.
want to touch on because we have a hybrid portfolio, so we have short-term rentals and midterm rental. Again, midterm rentals is typically anything that is 30 days or more. Short-term rentals is anything less than that. So we do a hybrid approach for both homes and for apartment complexes or apartments.
Hmm.
And in some cases, we've had companies reach out to us that need multiple doors for an extended period of time. So it could be 6 months, it could be a year, it could be 2 years. So being able to have the network of apartment management companies, apartment owners, developers can put you in a position that when a company comes out to reach out to you and they say, "Hey, um, we need 20 doors for 9 months. Can you make that happen?" I say, "Absolutely. All I need to do is make a phone call to this developer. He has 20 doors available in this apartment complex. Name the price." Right.
Hmm.
So having that kind of relationship is key. Um, so anyway, I'll stop there. I feel like I've been talking for a lot, but I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
I
actually
wanna ask
excited
you
about this.
something. I wanna I wanna ask you. We will get into the midterm rental conversation, but I want to talk about the arbitrage model because I hear a lot of people saying that that model is dead, that it's not sustainable, that it's impossible to scale. Other people love it and have managed to be successful with it. Uh, there's a few things there, which is, of course, the capital intensiveness of the model versus management, right? Is one where you need that capital to be able to put the unit up to speed. You have the risk factor of like having to pay that fixed rent no matter what, and how do you hedge against that? So just your thoughts on, I hear a lot of people saying that it used to be a lot easier to get landlords to accept as well, whereas with more and more people becoming aware of the model, it has become harder and harder. So what are your thoughts on the arbitrage model at a high level, how it has evolved, where versus when you started, and is it a model that can truly be, sustainable and scalable, or is that part of the past?
It- I think, well, I know that it is sustainable and scalable to a point. I'm not sure what the threshold for a number of doors is. My guess is probably around 40 or 50 doors. And then beyond that, it just becomes much more difficult to maintain quality because that is the
Mm.
biggest factor um, with arbitrage in particular. And I also say with apartment complexes because I don't know if you were talking about apartments versus homes, but those are two very different pathways, two very different approaches, and two very different uh, operation styles. I don't know if you want to go into that or not, but you know, the biggest piece, I mean, as we all know, with arbitrage is who has control. If something goes wrong, you're at the mercy of the landlord in many cases, right? So you are now in a position to where you have to wait on them to resolve an issue. If the AC goes out or something of that nature. Now, one of the keys and a lot that has allowed us to be so successful on the home side of things is we take on a lot of responsibilities in our wheelhouse so that we do have that control. So I'll give you an example. When we take on an arbitrage for a home, we take on pest control, lawn care, pool maintenance, all of that. So when something goes wrong or something happens, we know exactly who to call. It's all on us, right? We can't blame
Hmm.
the owner for, oh, the owner didn't pay the pool guy, so pool guy didn't come, so now the pool's dirty. No, we don't. You
Hmm.
just want to avoid that at all costs, right? So that kind of
Hmm.
thing is pretty important in understanding. Also on the apartment side, you know that they're going to come and fix things at their discretion, right? When they have time, if it's not an emergency. And as you know from the short-term rental side of things, a lot of things are emergencies for folks, because it's a short-term rental, right? It's a different level of expectation on when things should be fixed. Uh, so that's another
So how do
key.
you deal with that, for example? Like, how do you deal with that in apartment buildings?
So we've done it a couple of ways. One is just again making sure that you nurture that relationship with the office staff. That may be able to get to things a little bit quicker for you versus other people in the complex because of your relationship, right, and what you guys are doing.
Hmm.
And so you never want to, burn that bridge or cause friction in the relationship from that aspect. Um, but there's the relationship part. There's also actually getting contact information for whoever is doing maintenance on the site. Many times people don't have that
Mm.
information. So if you're able to find them, whether you're walking the hallways or, you meet them there when they come to the repair and get their conservation, that is another way to be able to do that. Now, granted, there are some things that you can do on the maintenance side that you have control over, right? So all the furniture that you bring in, you have control over all of that, right? If a
So,
couch leg breaks, that's on you to get it fixed, and you need to have someone on your team, whether it's another handyman or maintenance man, be able to take that on. Now, one of the things that people try to do, which can be very risky, is they will have maybe a handyman come in and fix it or a fridge or a stove or something for a property that is an apartment complex, which is a little different than a condo that you own. Is there's liability there because if your handyman goes in and fixes something that is owned by the apartment complex and it causes more damage and things of that nature, then you're going to be responsible for the damages that has caused, right? So let's
okay,
say if they came and fixed a plumbing
gotta
leak
be
that was
careful there.
happening. Yeah, oh,
Hmm.
absolutely. And they came and fixed it,
Got
and
it.
then something happened, and the pipe burst, and now the whole apartment complex is flooded. That's
Now
on you.
it's your problem.
That's not,
Got
yeah.
it. Got it.
So
Okay.
yeah. Anyway,
Talking about
so
risks.
purchase.
Talking about risks, Mike. One of the risks of arbitrage is, of course, the fact that, like we were saying, like the payment is due no matter what. So, what kind of exit clauses, if any, have you tried to include in your contracts there?
Yeah, that's a good one. So um, yeah, there's actually a couple of layers to this. I want to peel back. So typically, and we usually have way more control and add way more control in the leases for homes because those are typically individual landlords and not large companies than we
Hmm.
do with apartment complexes. I'll start with the homes. So there's a couple different pieces you always want to make sure you have in those type of lease arbitrages. One is, what is your notice to vacate? Typically, you want to have something that's less than you would typically uh, see in a lease. So we typically have about a 30-day notice to vacate, where the traditional standard is 60-day or even 90-day. That allows you, if you absolutely need to part ways for whatever reason, things of that nature, um, that it doesn't, handcuff you to the 60 days. I have to stay for 60 days and continue
Hmm.
to lose more money if it's not profitable or whatever reason that you're deciding to leave. The other piece of that is setting expectations on that property owner, because again, you don't own the home for large repairs or repairs over a certain dollar amount. That's something you need to
Hmm.
negotiate and have an agreement upon with that owner. So it could go something like, we will take care of all repairs under $150 or under $200. anything over that,
Hmm.
you're responsible for. And we can communicate that with you. If it's something that's an emergency, you need to have somebody in place for that, or
Hmm.
we will pay for that, and you will need to reimburse us, right?
Hmm.
Because we can't wait, especially if we already have a team. We can't wait on them to go and get 2 3 bids from someone, and now 2 3 days has passed. The people still don't have any AC or things that we don't
Hmm.
have that
Hmm.
luxury of time as you would with a long term tenant in a space like that.
Hmm.
The other key before, like I mentioned, is being able to put all those things in your wheelhouse for control. So pest control. Um, Typically, you want to put all utilities in your company's name or your name as well, because for the same reason, if a payment gets missed, you don't want you know you don't want the internet to go out, or you don't want the water to not work when you have guests and things of that nature. So being able to have control of that and monitoring that at all times, right?
Hmm.
The other piece, which this I didn't talk about this earlier in terms of negotiating um, for homes, is being able to potentially partner with the homeowner. And what that means is because it's you have to find some leverage with that apartment homeowner to make them want to lower the rent for you or give you concessions, like I mentioned before, with a couple of weeks or first month, so on and so forth. And in many cases, we try to find homes that are probably, upper class B, maybe lower class A, where they maybe need some type of improvements that the owner would appreciate. So
Hmm.
I'm trying to think of some examples we've done in the past before. We did a renovation to a a backyard where we added in a pergola, a wooden pergola, and we had the barbecue grill and rock formations and all this kind of stuff in the backyard. And we partnered with
Hmm.
the owner to be able to provide that because and there were some other things. I think there were some upgraded window shades that we wanted, and some other things that I can't recall at the moment. But basically, we shared
Okay, so you
costs.
basically say, "I'll take care of all your shared costs." Okay,
We
okay.
shared cost on those things because we knew we were going to do it anyway. So we said, well, why pay out of pocket, for all of it on our own? Because this is an amenity we're trying to add. It's no different than people trying to add hot tubs and pools, right, to properties.
Sure, sure, sure,
So
sure,
in
sure.
that scenario,
Okay.
if that's something that you want to, shared cost. And now the key with that is being able to have the wherewithal and the knowledge. And this is where doing the right, research on the front end that you're going to be able to recoup those costs by adding that amenity, right?
Hmm.
So in those scenarios, and in this one in particular, we're actually able to get a 3-year lease with that owner. We partnered with them on shared costs for that, and there were some other things that we did as well. Uh, Particularly for homes, another peace of mind that the homeowners like is that we partner with a local vendor that does mechanical, electrical, and plumbing inspections. So we have inspections done for all properties that we take on board, that we lease, and we
Okay.
manage. And what that does is that allows you to know all the knowns and unknowns of the property that maybe even the owner doesn't know, that could be potential issues in the near future or far future, right? So it's kind of the preventative
Hmm.
maintenance aspect of things. Or if there's repairs that needed to happen right now, that's also another negotiating and bargaining chip that you can have. Well, hey, after our
Hmm.
inspections, we found that this, and this, I mean, this kind of really needs to be repaired. Um, can you get this done or can you come off on rent? So this negotiating chip that you have. And I think that's where a lot of opportunity lies for people because it's of value to the owner. You give them this full, at least the partner that we work with, it's this full, detailed report. They do HVAC testing, they do a flush for the water heaters, all that kind of stuff. It's very
Okay.
similar, probably not as robust as an inspection that you would have done for a home that you're about to buy, right? So,
Right, right, right. No, but
yeah.
that's smart. That's smart. So coming up with those things that you can offer to either pay for fully or split the cost on, and have those be things that you use as leverage, like you said, to try to get the better terms or more affordable rent. Got it. Now,
Hmm.
last question on arbitrage, and then we'll move on. Is it becoming harder? Are you seeing it become harder for landlords or apartment building managers to accept? or for you it doesn't, it hasn't, like the increased competition hasn't affected you, let's say? Like, do you think it's as easy as it used to be to get landlords to accept, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think I think it all depends on where you are in your position, in your journey. Having the experience that we have, the portfolio that we have a proven track record, right? You can see, I mean, all the stuff, whether it's the reviews, our website, referrals that we have, and that's another potential thing as well to build rapport, not only from the apartment complex side, but also the single family landlord side is coming to the table with referrals for other people that
Hmm.
you're already working with, or other people that can vouch for that you're going to say you're going to do what you say you're going to do as a company, right? That is another key to mitigate some risk and just kind of change the mindset that people have just right off the bat that, hey, I don't want to do this. This is too risky. People are going to be partying in my house and all those other kind of things, right? And
Hmm.
all the other stuff in terms of like the noise monitoring, which I didn't talk about. You talk about all of that when you
Okay.
present that to the owner, because that
So
is
in other words,
basically
for
dispelling
you,
some.
like in your view, as long as it's done correctly, as long as you negotiate correctly, as long as you do it right, for you arbitrage is still an opportunity that people can pursue and be successful in.
Absolutely, and you have to make sure you're doing it in the right market too, right? The right market, because you want to be able to see or have the demand. And I hate to use the word saturation, but I think that's what people familiarize themselves with. Is it a saturated market? Is it not a saturated market? I would say probably a lot of the quote unquote saturated markets that people say are saturated are not actually saturated. It's just that they are all seeking the same avatar, right?
Hmm.
So there are very many different avatars on both the short-term rental side and the mid-term rental side that people may not necessarily be tapping into, right? So, people talk about the travel nurses, they talk about the construction crews, all that kind of stuff, but nobody talks about, plastic surgeons, physical
Hmm.
therapists, all these kinds of things. So when you start to, and also I would say it is kind of, it sometimes it's hard to explain just because I'm in a different place than let's say someone is that's first starting out that has no units at all, right? Um, but the mindset of actually treating it like a business is also very crucial because a lot of people do this
Hmm.
as a hobby or they have the misconception that it is a passive strategy or a passive operation, which it is far from that.
it's
We can
it's
all attest to
everything
that.
but passive, right?
And I wouldn't say that it's like completely hands on once you have the systems that are in place, and that only comes with scale,
Right.
right? So we didn't have a property management system. We had no automated messages or emails probably until we got to our seventh property, believe it or not.
Hmm.
So we had seven doors before we
Hmm.
even started doing any of that. And it wasn't probably until we got to 12 or 13 that we actually had a VA brought on board to
Hmm.
handle the
Hmm.
guest communications, all the other things that happen. So I would say, it comes with the mindset because that mindset is going to make you look at your business and the product in a different way. And going back to what I mentioned
Hmm.
before about, the saturation and the avatars, you also have to look at the product that you have. And we're constantly trying to reevaluate our own portfolio in the same manner is, a lot of people think that they just need to get more leads generation, more avatars and things of that nature. And you also have to look at the product that you're providing and the service that you're providing. Is it to the level that will meet the expectations of that particular avatar? How are you targeting these? Because I will say again, you know, typically the people that are saying that certain areas are saturated, if you ask them how they're marketing their property, most of them will probably tell you that they're only on Airbnb or only on Airbnb and VRBO. I would say
Hmm.
probably 80% of that audience. But there are multiple other
whereas
platforms
whereas you
that
have
are doing.
whereas you have a pretty different approach. Like you have very, like, I would say, diversified sources of booking. So let's talk a little bit about that. Where
Yeah.
does that come from? Because to your point, most people just put them on the OTAs and cross their fingers and hope for the best. So, what have you done differently, and yeah, what have you learned when it comes to diversifying your booking sources?
So with diversified bookings, I think this is I don't want to say uncharted territory. I think some people try to dabble in it. Um, but a lot of people, which I get, you know, Airbnb and the OTAs, it's an easy way to get bookings, right? They do all the marketing advertising for you. They have the platforms and the structure, and they have all the views and all these other aspects. And with that becomes two very significant things. And again, if you're thinking about it from a business perspective, business, like I said before, um, you should look at this very, very differently. And I mean it from the aspect that you're basically giving 90%, and in some cases 100% of all of your revenue source and income coming from one stream. I don't know a business out there that only has their revenue coming from one stream, or just two streams for that matter, right? I mean,
Hmm.
literally, you can pick a business, pick a car wash, pick a pizza parlor, whatever it may be. It's more than just two sources, right? And so again, when you come at this with the mindset of this is a business, that really shapes your perspective around all the things that an actual business should be doing to diversify their revenue streams, diversify their client base, and start to put things in place that will allow them to operate sustainably, right? And long term. So I think a lot of people, they don't know how long they're going to be in this industry, right? When they start, they're like, oh, I'll try it out for a year, or I'll do it for 2 or 3 years. Um, I'm not saying you need to have, because we didn't have it. I'm not saying you need to have a full blown business plan from day one, but I mean that's kind of a prerequisite for a business, right? Even if you don't do it day one, if you do it, a couple months after you start, whatever that is, because that really charts the path, and so you can be intentional about everything, right? So when we started I don't say getting off of the OTAs because we're still using them, becoming less reliant by diversifying those revenue streams, started to look at things like, because again, we do short term and midterm rentals. So we're probably on about mm, nine, maybe 10 different short term rental platforms and about six different midterm rental platforms. And this is outside of any direct bookings, right? Um, And what that means is that allows us to be able to not only market in multiple places, but when people also see that you're in those other places as well, it does provide a little bit more credibility, right? I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with only being on, VRBO or Airbnb, but from an SEO standpoint, right? Because if you were to do a Google search, whether it's the listing name or the company name, you're gonna see that boost, especially if it's like hyper localized in your market or your region. That's how you become the go-to, and that's also how you build rapport if you're starting to do more acquisitions and growing a portfolio.
Hmm.
Um, but also what that means is, you know, how are you reaching these individuals? How are you getting the new clients? How are you reaching these new avatars or existing customers? A lot of people discount the fact that it is much, much easier, especially if you're in a destination market, right? Where people have to travel to that market, unlike maybe an urban suburban market, which maybe people have to travel to. But I would say more often than not, most people are coming within maybe 200 miles, right? As opposed
Hmm.
to, maybe something in Miami or Florida or on the beach somewhere or on the mountains, right? Very different. And so what I mean by that is it's much easier, and this goes for any business, right? It's much easier to remarket or retarget an existing client that has already done business with you than to either pay or put the effort or energy to find new clients. Now, yes, the
Hmm.
platforms have made this easy because they're doing this. They're putting the millions of dollars in ad spend, so on and so forth. But you have to give them a commission now. But not only do you
Hmm.
have to give them a commission, you give them, in many cases, the autonomy to do whatever they want at any moment to some degree, because we've heard some horror stories, um, for full refunds, not paying for damages that guests have done to a property, all the above, right?
Hmm.
So what this also does is it gives you potentially more control in your wheelhouse because you set the standards, you do the rental agreement, all those kinds of things, right? On that part. Now, everyone wants to go shift to direct bookings, and all this kind of stuff, but there also comes another level of structure and process that you need to have in place to actually make that happen, to where you're mitigating risk. And what I mean is mitigating risk from potential, whether it's parties, theft, or even fraud. Because as we know in tourism and the travel industry in general, fraud is a very, very huge problem. And so being able to mitigate that because, you know, for the people that have not gotten deep into direct booking, they may have never come across that issue or may never heard of it. And so therefore people kind of nonchalantly say, well, yeah, I want to have all the direct bookings. And
Hmm.
so having systems in place, the screening, the rental agreements, all the other things are pretty important if you plan to start to shift away from that. And I think people should tread
3D
very
3D
softly when they have
verification,
them.
3D
Yeah,
verification as
yeah,
well. Yes,
exactly,
I would add that to
exactly.
the list. Yes.
Um, because think about it. I mean, I'll give you a quick example for those that may not know what happens from a fraud standpoint. Is you have someone that may book a place, direct booking, whether it's through your website or whatever you're using for that. And typically, a lot of the direct booking sites, unless you're doing something super custom, and even the ones that are provided by the PMS systems or property management systems, typically use Stripe. So in that particular process, if someone could book a stay, they could stay, 2 days, 3 nights, a whole week, a whole month, and then a couple weeks later, or maybe even sometimes a couple of months later, depends on the statutes with the bank. They could just say, "Hey, I didn't actually stay there. That was fraud. Somebody else bought that on my card or something." And then now you, as a business, and in many cases, what happens with Stripe in particular is because it's connected to your bank account, right? Because you have to get your payouts. They
Hmm.
Whatever that customer paid, whether it's, $500 or $5,000, that is ripped directly from your bank account. And now you have to it's almost like, you're guilty until proven innocent. You have to state your
Hmm.
case as to why that money is owed to you because they actually stayed there, they signed a rental agreement, it was them that paid, it was their name on the car, all that stuff. And that's why having that documentation and process in place makes it much easier to potentially recoup that dispute that you're going to have to do. Uh, Now, I will say um, that's not 100% foolproof because we've definitely seen cases from people before. They've had all the documentation, they've had images of the people walking into the house, everything, IDs, and they still lost the case for the dispute.
Hmm.
Um, American Express, in particular, is pretty bad about giving money back to the vendor that they're claiming fraud for. So that's just something to be aware of. And in many cases, if you have too many of these on your account, they can actually shut your account down, and then essentially there's no way for you to be able to funnel that income in unless you're doing like Zelle or ACH payments, which that's not a streamlined way to do things, right?
Hmm.
And it can be a bit cumbersome.
No,
And there's
definitely.
this there's this optics with the guest too. It's like, well, why is he asking for Zelle? Now, some people do that. Now, trust me, on midterm rentals, I've seen people do it. But for short term stays, you can't scale that, right? Because there's too many
Hmm.
steps that
Hmm.
need to happen. So this is something to be mindful of. And I think with the diversification also comes capturing previous guest information and remarketing to them. Obviously, not
Hmm.
being spam to their email inbox, whether that's email marketing, text marketing, which we're starting to do now, and any inquiries that come in. We have many people that call us from Google looking for places to stay or other or referrals, and you want to be able to capture all of that and put them into campaigns, right? Just like anything else, you sign up for Starbucks or you sign up for Target. You bought something and you want to know the deals that are coming out. You want to know the coupons, all that stuff. So whether they're coming
Hmm.
back to your city to stay, you want to be top of mind that they think about. Now the problem with that is it's it's harder to do that if you only have a few doors because it's limited on your availability, right?
Hmm.
Having a portfolio of 26, 27 properties, we have some decent availability, for people. But if you only have two homes or two apartments, it's like when somebody reaches out, I'm always full. That's not a good.
Hmm.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but you're passing out on some of those opportunities. Now you could pass those on to other people as referrals, but they want to stay with you. I mean, that's why they came to you, right? So just
Mike,
understanding
what
those
about
dynamics.
corporate rentals, Mike? Because I know you're also like, let's like walk us through those categories of alternative booking sources, and I think you're big on building B2B relationships, and developing relationships with companies and whatnot. Just at a high level, super quickly, like what does that look
Yeah,
like, and how do you build that if you're looking into diversifying your booking sources?
sure. Um, so a couple of ways that we do that is we get involved in local events. So there's lots of organizations that host, whether they're networking events, different meetings, and they can be industry specific or not. So we do go to healthcare professionals networking events so that we can be in the room with those individuals, those owners of, like I said before, maybe it's a physical therapist company and they need housing for their folks when they're coming for physical therapy for days or weeks at a time, right? Or somebody that's doing recovery for other type of patient work. Um, another one which we haven't done in a while, but we actually visit construction sites, like big construction sites, and try to connect with the either superintendent or who's working that project because they have not only people that are there working on site that may need temporary housing, because the thing about it is just because they have a housing option now doesn't mean it's the right housing option that is ideal for them. It's just that's what happens.
Hmm.
In many cases, you'll find it specifically to the construction industry that they put them in motels and um, they put them in motels and they're just making it work out, right? But if there were another option available for them, maybe a 5 bedroom, 6 bedroom home, multiple beds, they would rather prefer that, right?
Hmm.
And so it's only until the conversation is started. And the other key too is whether you have a big portfolio, smaller mid-range portfolio, is they want to be able to deal with a company that has a reputation and has the backing to be able
Hmm.
to take on something like that, right? Not saying you can't do it as an individual, but if I come to them as a company saying we're going to offer you this service, we have 3 homes that are ready for all of your employees, as opposed to them out them going out and sourcing themselves 3 different operators from 3 different homes. They would rather just
Hmm.
speak to one person, one entity, one company, streamline the process. Everybody likes turnkey, right? So
Hmm.
that is some leverage that you can build for that particular avatar. There's also, which we haven't really gotten into this because we don't really have places that hit the price point in Target. And that's another thing you have to think about too. But there are many people that are doing student housing on the midterm rental side. So with the universities, or even think about it like this. So every university has adjunct professors, traveling professors, or visiting professors that are there for
Hmm.
a year, maybe 2 years at a time, and they don't want to,
Hmm.
sign a lease in an apartment and have to find furniture, and they may have the funds to be able to do a longer term, or even in some cases a shorter term, um, as they transition, right? Because anybody moving to a new city ideally doesn't want to have, you know, a full on plan, especially if they don't know much about the city. Like this is where I'm going to stay. This is where we're moving to. Sometimes they want time to figure things out, right? They want to be able to feel the city. Maybe stay in this. I'll just say Airbnb for a couple weeks or a month to tour apartments, right? I need to tour apartments or tour homes. If we're about to buy a home or have a home built, we need to be here in the city. We can't do this from New York when we're moving to
Hmm.
Dallas, right? We need to be in
For
Dallas
sure.
already. So those as well. So we've been starting to partner more with realtors, as well as um, renovation companies as well, and residential construction companies, because they are the ones on the front lines when something happens to a home and people need to be relocated. So
And Mike,
they
a
can
quick question
refer
here.
you as a partner. Hey, I know that your house just flooded. You got to work through insurance. We do have a company that we work with that I love to share. Um, that's one of our partners. They're PBD Living. You can reach out to them, and they can work with your insurance company. All that stuff, right? So you start to
Yeah.
build these relationships, and it's not like you're going to be getting phone calls every single day or every week. You
Hmm.
Again, it's a business. So when you think about it as a business and you treat it as such, you have to go in with the mindset that, hey, this may not pay off today or tomorrow or this week or even this month, but planting that seed may have a huge opportunity or just opportunity in general in the near future. Because we've had deals where we've worked with people and we didn't hear anything for 6 months
Hmm.
or a year, but then they came back around, right?
Hmm.
So you have to continually be planting these seeds and nurturing these relationships, creating these contacts. And the key is keeping touch with them. That's the hardest part, especially if you're a solopreneur, if you don't have a team, is how do you stay top of mind with these individuals? You can do some of that through email marketing. I've even seen some people now, which we're going to start to test automated calls, right? So where we'll send them an automated message via a call or even a video, right? Say, hey, just checking in with you. Hope you're doing well. Blah blah blah. It can be from your voice. It can be pre-recorded. All that stuff. So the key is to nurture these relationships, build and develop that. And I think for people that are trying to get deeper into the arbitrage space, especially having connections with developers, like residential developers, because
Hmm.
those are going to be the ones that are having new projects built, new things coming online where they have a need for filling vacancy and increasing occupancy through multiple doors. So when an opportunity does come up, I think the biggest one that we had come through before, which it just didn't work out in terms of timing, is we needed I think we needed 30, no, 41 bedroom apartments for 6 months. It's like, how do you make that happen? Right? There's a couple different ways. You can either partner with a developer and you can structure it to where, you know, you're making sure that you're pricing the deal or the contract appropriately for getting all the furniture, leases, all that kind of stuff, so that it makes sense. You could even potentially rent the furniture depending on the size of the home or the apartment, because then that's less upfront cost too, right? And you're
Hmm.
only paying for the furniture for the months you need it at night. So all those are potential opportunities. And so now you're bringing value to that developer or that owner, and you're creating a solution and solving a problem for that company that's bringing those employees in or whatnot, right? And a lot of especially during intern season, a lot of this stuff is predictable, right? A lot of, I mean, you could literally pull up a list of Fortune 500 companies that have offices in your city, and you could reach out to them. I would say ideally in the fall or super super early spring, and start to develop that relationship because they're going to have interns, they're going to need a place to stay, whether it's the interns paying for it or the company paying for it, and just nurturing that relationship. That is key.
Mike,
So,
for someone listening to this that's thinking, why go through all that hassle when I can just, sit and wait for Airbnb bookings to come in? You mentioned the risk factor, so seeing it as a business, diversifying your income streams like any other business would. That makes sense. What about on the money side? Like, are you actually, other than saving on OTA fees, are you actually able to charge premiums and get more than you could have gotten through the OTAs?
for B2B or business to
Yeah.
business, absolutely. For
Okay.
B2C, business to customer, maybe not so much. Now, what you are able to do is you're able to pass on the savings. So typically, I think Airbnb is moving to what, a 14% uh, or
Hmm.
14% commission or service fee or something like that. Anyway, that service fee, you want to make sure that that is uh, less than what you are going to be charging holistically for the whole stay, right? So let's just say the service fee is 10% on Airbnb. By default, typically you have a 3% processing fee if you use Stripe or similar payment processors. So basically, the difference is 7. So that 7% savings, you're passing it on to the guest. Now, some other things that could be more of a benefit or attractors to doing direct versus the OTAs is you can offer free early check-in. Whereas otherwise, some people charge for early check-in or free late checkout. If you're going to book
Hmm.
direct with us, we'll give
Hmm.
it to you for free. We'll give you 3 hours or 4 hours for free if you book direct with us, as opposed to outside of that. Now, if you don't charge for that on the OTAs, then it's a little different story.
Yeah,
And maybe there's
yeah.
other certain amenities that you provide that you would give to them that you would not give to somebody that's on the OTA.
But on the B2B side, like tell me, like how much more are you able to get for a unit that you rent B2B versus traditionally through the OTAs? Just to give us an
I
idea of like why you're willing to go through all that hassle of maintaining the relationships and going after them and networking events, because like sounds like a lot, so it's got to be worth
well,
it.
well, I'm glad you said that. So it does range based on the avatar that you're doing. So whether it's insurance versus construction versus student housing, I've seen anywhere between 10 to 30% more margin that you can charge for B2B. Now
Okay.
the key with that is, even if you're on the lower side of that with 10%, you still have to think about the opportunity costs or lost opportunity costs of not doing it at all, because when slow season happens, or maybe there's 100 new units that go online on Airbnb tomorrow in your city, or 1,000.
Hmm.
There's more competition now, right? So, but they're not doing that. Like what, I can't remember who said it, but you have to be willing to do the things that other people won't do in your industry or business, and that's what sets you apart from everyone else. Because
Hmm.
that's what's gonna to bring the value and bring the revenue and the stability and sustainability of that business. I think that's
Hmm.
that's the key.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And Mike, if we could, summarize, let's say from your experience, like what's the either the biggest mistake you've made that you wish you hadn't made, and kind of a lesson that went with it, or just overall what's something you wish you had known when you were starting out in this business that you wish to pass along to other operators that might be looking to grow their portfolio and build a sustainable business.
I think the biggest one, I wouldn't say it's a mistake, but just something I knew sooner and had just had more knowledge base about, is there's actually a couple of things. Um, and it goes back to before what I mentioned about actually structuring your business properly, um, and being able to have all the things in place, also, so that your business, again, it is a business, not a hobby. It can be a hobby for some people, and I don't, you know, uh, I'm not saying that that's bad or anything, but the people that are actually trying to make money and have it run as a business, is you need to position yourself, structure yourself, and operate in a way that you're going to be fundable. So when you go out to seek funding, right? Whether that's through short-term loans, long-term loans, whether it be grants. There's a lot of small business grants out there available for people as well, and all the things that I mentioned before about the LLC, having your business agreements and operating agreements, all that stuff in place. Like a real business, doing your taxes, having the business taxes done, having your bookkeeping, all of that stuff is really going to set you up for success. Because, and even like down to the simple things too, which I know some people maybe not think about, but paying for stuff on time, right? If you have business credit cards and all that, and having good credit utilization, so you have a good credit score, so that you can get more funding and things like that. It's all important, and structuring it and focusing on that earlier, is one thing I wish I would have done, just because it would allow us to scale a little bit faster, and not use so much of our own capital just reinvesting into the business. Um, but now, I mean, we're in a position to where we have multiple capital funding sources. and also for working capital too, right? A lot of times you have people have the issue that, hey, I ran out of money. That's the one thing you don't want to have happen in a business, right? Cash flow, whether that's slow season or something happened, whatever. And so being in a position to where you have that as a potential fallback um, is really key because that could be the difference between you going out of business or staying in business until the next contract or whatever that may be. And or think about it this way too: you still have to pay. Well, we like to pay our people on time. You still have to have all these vendors that you have to pay, right? Even though you may not get paid until, a week later, 2 weeks later, at the end of the month. So you have to think about all those kinds of things. And that's another important thing with B2B is, you know, typically you may get your payment all up front, but sometimes there's a delay. Like I'll give you an example now. We're working directly with State Farm on a 2-month contract for somebody that we have that's housing. I think they had a house flood or something like that. And I'll actually share the numbers. So this is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. The rent on it is 2,500 a month, and the monthly rent that we're charging them, all inclusive, is $7,800. It's a little more than the 30% I mentioned earlier, but so that's $7,800 per month. So that's almost 15 grand. Um, and even after all the other expenses, operating costs, I mean, we may come to like I don't know 7 grand in total. So that's 7 grand in profit in 2 months.
Hmm.
So, and this is just to like to show, and again, this is midterm rental. This is not short-term rental, right? Um, hedging your or mitigating risk and liability, because at the end of the day, when slow season happen or when you have low occupancy, you have these other avenues to be able to generate income, right?
Hmm.
I could also go into some of the other stuff that we're starting to do now as well with affiliate marketing and commissioning, or not commissioning, and commissions for other services, which is a whole other pathway. Because think about it, I always tell people you have to think about the model with you can think about Starbucks, you can think about American Airlines. They don't make their money like Starbucks just makes their money on coffee. They make their money on everything else that they're selling, right? The airlines doesn't make money off the tickets they sell. They make money off of everything else. So you
Hmm.
have to think about, I know we can't do that explicitly in our business model, but there are small things that you can do. Like for example, we partner with the rideshare program. It's a group rideshare. So we have a lot of homes. Um, we give them a discount to be able to use the rideshare because a lot of people will, you know, take trips outside of the city to go to concerts and events in a big group. And rather than having, 5 vehicles or 6 vehicles, why don't you all just get in this 16 passenger van or sprinter van, and it's got AC, some of them have Wi-Fi, all that stuff, and travel and have fun. I mean, even if you're going on a night, or um, a night on the town kind of thing, where you're just using the bus to travel around the city. I mean, we get affiliate commission on all of those sales, for example.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
could see, we haven't done this, but there's certain people that partner with at-home chefs. So you want to, do a certain experience for your guests, where you have an at-home chef to prepare a meal for them, or maybe somebody is coming in town to do a bridal shower or a baby shower or some kind of party, whatever it may be. You can start partnering with cake makers and vendors that provide chairs and tables and all these other things. So one is you don't have to hold that inventory and manage it or any of that. You just refer them to them and they handle the rest. So there's a lot of
Hmm.
opportunity in the industry. Um, I think people you just have to have the right lens to be able to actually see it.
I love it, man. I love it. No, that's awesome. Ancillary sources of revenue as well, where you don't even have to deliver the service. You just offer it. And on the Starbucks example that you just gave, it's those ancillary services, of course, and products and whatnot. And it's also the retention, right? Which is something you touched on earlier, as far as the whole how much they retargeting your previous guests and whatnot. I saw somewhere a video that was talking about the lifetime value of a client for Starbucks.
Mm.
$14,000 during the lifetime of a client. for Starbucks, like a client will generate $14,000 of revenue for Starbucks. So all of a sudden,
Wow.
if that's how much you are going to make during the lifetime of that customer, then that dictates as well how much you can spend to acquire that customer. And so that's where they can scale so fast, right? So it's this ratio of CAC to lifetime gross profit that is talked about, and the higher that ratio is, or in other words, the more you're getting in lifetime gross profit per unit of cost of acquiring a customer, like the more scalable of
Mhm.
a business you're gonna have. So I think that it goes to say that, focusing on retention, focusing on building those relationships and maintaining those relationships, like at the end of the day, those are all great lessons for sustainability and longevity in business. So
Mhm.
I think that these are all conversations that don't happen a lot in our industry, but they're very important because it's easier not to do it. It's a lot easier not to do it than to do it. So to have someone like you that is willing to put in the work and is willing to put in the hours shows us that it's possible. So I think it should be taken as an example of the fact that you can do more than just sit and complain about you not liking the way Airbnb treats you. You can go out there
Do
and
something
and, and
about it.
find
Yeah.
ways to not be as dependent on them. So I love it. I love it. Listen, Mike. I think this has been great. I could keep you here for hours. Believe me, it's been super fun. But we'll leave it at that. Where can people connect with you? Where can people stay in touch? And yeah, learn more about what you're doing.
Yeah. So they can follow us on our Instagram handle at PBD Stays. That's PBD Stays. And follow us. We're always sharing good content about things to do in the city, our places, things of that nature. And I'm one of the authors for the Hospitable Hosts book as well. So you can find content and maybe some other nuggets that I've shared in the chapter that I've written in that book. So Hospitable Hosts Volume 3 specifically. So but yeah, I
Awesome.
enjoyed this time and love always sharing what we have learned and from not only our own experiences but also other people's experiences. And look forward to staying connected.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike.
Absolutely. Have a good one.